So we're ready?
Okay, one of the fascinating things about the Bible and Shakespeare is that you can virtually explore every aspect of life through them. You could analyze from the feminine perspective, from the evil perspective, from animal perspective, and so on and so on. And I mean, virtually everything. I know on my shelf I have tons of analyticals for both Bible and Shakespeare, and I'm so always surprised. And in this case, this is doing the Bible from a shepherd, an actual shepherd. Anyway, the book is A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23 by W. Phillip Keller. And the book was first published in 1970, and I think I found a copy at a yard sale or something in the 90s. And I loved the book and, read it at that time and always kind of remembered it and put it on my shelf and kind of forgot about it. And then about 6 months or so ago, my sister shows up because we're ardent yard sale and thrift shop goers. And she said, "Oh, have you ever read this book?" And she gave me another copy of it. And I went, yeah. So anyway, much of the Bible's terminology is couched in rural language, the simple language that the simple nomadic folk would have understood at the time. And today, however, we live in this urban man-made environment, and most of us are not familiar with, fields of crops, wildlife. In fact, many of us have never probably even seen a live sheep, except maybe at a zoo or a petting zoo or something like that, or walked in a great vineyard. And so this book is really very interesting because it gives you a whole new perspective on things. But Weldon Phillip Keller, on the other hand, grew up in East Africa, and he was surrounded by native herders whose customs probably closely resembled those of their counterparts in the Mideast. He was the son of a missionary parents, trained as an agronomist, which is the study and care of crops. For about 8 years, he actually made his own livelihood as a sheep rancher, and consequently, he's familiar with every phase of sheep management. Through the years, subsequently, he has worked as an agricultural development specialist, a wildlife photographer, a naturalist, and served as a lay pastor of a community church. He wrote 35 Christian books, including this one, which is probably his best known, and it still sells widely. I had also considered reviewing another one of his books at the same time, and it's called Lessons from a Sheepdog, A True Story of Transforming Love. And this is actually my favorite. Those of you who know my surprise. But anyway, I realized that there wasn't going to be enough time to do both books justice, and so maybe next summer. And there's another one of his books that I'm really interested in reading, and it's called A Gardener Looks at the Fruits of the Spirit, but I have yet to get that. He died in 1997 at the age of 77. So what he does in this book is he breaks down the 23rd Psalm line by line. So the first one is, "The Lord is my shepherd." David, the author of the poem, was himself a shepherd and the son of a shepherd, and later to be known as the Shepherd King of Israel. Here he's referring to Jehovah, the Lord God of Israel. But Keller does what so many later authors did, is they in trying to conceptualize the essence of who Christ was by bringing the wisdom and the language and the beautiful imagery from the Old Testament forth into describing the profound effect that Jesus had on them. And that's exactly what he does in this book. Hence, when Jesus was described as God incarnate among men, he declared emphatically that I am the good shepherd. Although David was a shepherd himself, he rather speaks with pride that his owner is the shepherd, the Lord who brought him into being, who through Christ laid down his life for him. He knew that the lot in life of any particular sheep depended upon the type of shepherd who owned it. The rest of the psalm recounts the manner in which the good shepherd shares no pains for the welfare of his sheep. As a sheep owner, Keller says that his responsibility for his flock didn't stop at when he paid hard cash for his flock. Sheep require more endless attention and meticulous care than any other livestock, period. To begin with, to identify his sheep, each shepherd will put a variation of notches in the sheep's ears. I guess it's in lieu of branding. And just like Christians are marked with the cross of Christ forever. So, second sentence, I shall not be in want. To not be in want is not only to receive proper care and management, but it can also mean being utterly contented in the shepherd's care, not desiring or craving more. Despite an unparalleled wealth in material assets today, we are insecure, unsure, bankrupt in spiritual values, restless, unsettled, covetous, greedy, never satisfied. And Keller said that one time he had an ewe, a beautiful ewe, who always believed that the grass was greener on the other side of the fence, and he could do nothing to persuade her that all evidence was to the contrary. And so she always found a way to the other side, and she often ended up foraging on barren ground. She taught her lambs to do it, and then gradually she started being followed by other sheep. Well, he loved the ewe as much as any other, but finally he just could not allow one obstinate, discontented ewe to destroy the whole ranch. By contrast, those who belong to the good shepherd can be completely satisfied with his management. Keller cites the example of a neighboring sheep farmer who was callous and indifferent to his flock, neglected his land, and left the flock to forage for himself. They fell prey to predators, drank muddy, polluted water, had no shelter from inclement weather. Compared to his flock, his neighbors were thin, weak, and diseased. He makes me lie down in green pastures. It is almost impossible to make sheep lie down unless 4 requirements are met. The first is freedom from fear. Sheep are very timid and easily panicked, have no means for self-defense. Constant restlessness takes its toll on health and the ability to survive. One morning, Keller found 9 of his best ewes, all soon to lamb, slaughtered by a cougar during the night. From then on, he slept with a rifle and flashlight by his bed and frequently went out into the field. He realized that nothing so quieted and reassured the sheep as to see him in the field, just as the Christian is comforted by his awareness that his shepherd is nearby, dispelling fear, panic, terror of the unknown. The second requirement is freedom from tension, cruel competition. In every animal society, you have a pecking order, a dominance order. Among the sheep, it's called the butting order. And often it's an arrogant, cunning, domineering old ewe at the top. And Keller noticed that whenever he was present, the sheep seemed to quickly forget their rivalries. The third requirement is freedom from torment. In the summer, sheep can be driven to absolute distraction by pests such as nasal flies, bot flies, warble flies, and ticks. The Good Shepherd must apply various types of insect repellents repeatedly and see that there are shelter belts of trees and bush available for refuge. This takes a lot of money, time, and effort. Similarly, the Christian life, there are many irritations, frustrations, and excuse me, and we are comforted from these torments by the function of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit makes us real in the presence of Christ and brings quietness, serenity, strength, and calmness. We are anointed with the Holy Spirit. The fourth requirement is freedom from hunger. Many of the sheep countries of the world are in dry, semi-arid land. It is not natural or common to find green pastures in these areas. Rather, the green pastures were the result of clearing rocky lands, tearing out brush, root stumps, plowing, seeding, irrigating, and alternating fields. When God led his people into the promised land, he foresaw such an abundant life, free from sin and full of contentment. God continually cultivates us, clears the rocks of unbelief, tears out the roots of bitterness, sows the seed of his word, waters us with the rain of his presence. He leads me beside still or quiet waters. Although sheep thrive in dry, semi-arid country, they still require water. Unlike some species, they cannot survive on browsing on plants with moisture and dew. Thirsty sheep become restless and they will set out in search of water, drinking even from polluted potholes full of parasites and germs. Consequently, it's up to the shepherd to find the good water. In the same manner, Christ, the Good Shepherd, made it clear that thirsty souls of humans can be satisfied when drawing upon himself. If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. He alone knows where the still, quiet, clean, pure water is to be found that can be satisfying. Sadly, though, so many people today satisfy their thirst by pursuing almost every other substitute imaginable, only to find that the wells of the world will not quench their thirst. He restores my soul. Even someone in the Good Shepherd's care can be cast down and dejected. David himself tasted defeat and fell prey to temptation. A cast down sheep is a shepherd's term for a sheep that has turned over on its back and cannot get up again by itself. This often happens when a ewe becomes heavy in lamb, or sometimes when she lies down in a soft hollow in the ground, or sometimes when she becomes weighted down by too much wool. And I don't know if some of you have seen on the internet, they'll have these sheep, that are like this, and they'll take off literally 50 pounds of wool. I mean, it's just amazing. Sometimes a ewe that is cast down will bleat for help, but often it will just lie there, lashing about in frightened frustration. And if it's not uprighted quickly, gases begin to build up in the room and excuse me. And as the gases expand, they retard and cut off the blood circulation to the extremities. They are also very vulnerable to predators in this condition. So vigilance of the shepherd is vital, and Keller himself often spent hours searching for a single sheep that was missing. And we all know that famous Bible story about Jesus searching for the one missing sheep. Similarly, when a child of God falls, perhaps seeking a soft way in life or having accumulated too much wool, which I know, having gotten rid of so much stuff just recently. Similarly, when God does not become furious. Think about Jesus's pathos and compassion with down and out individuals. He's the good shepherd who picks up cast sheep, sometimes putting us in a different pasture or putting us on a diet or having us divest ourselves of all our baggage. It is significant that no high priest was ever allowed to wear wool when he entered the Holy of Holies because it represented self, pride, and greed. So now you know when you read that in the Bible. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Sheep are notorious creatures of habit, following the same trails until rutted, grazing the same hills until they turn to desert wasteland, polluting their own ground until it becomes infested with parasites and bacteria. Hence, the importance of keeping sheep on the move, changing pastures frequently, guiding them firmly and diligently. Yea, though I walk through the valley. Both in Palestine and on Western sheep ranches, the most efficient shepherds will take their flocks onto distant ranges during the summer. This often entails long drives, gradually working their way into the more alpine meadows by late summer. David knew from firsthand experience about the dangers of these long treks and the necessity of maintaining constant watch over the flocks. While with a loving, caring shepherd, one needs to fear no evil and walk through the valley of death. There was no fear, just going to richer, higher ground. Dark valleys need not be disasters. Often the dark valleys are the best routes to reach the summits and also are usually well-watered routes. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Many shepherds carry a long, slender stick, which is called a staff, and a rod. Another word for it is a knob carry or a crude club. A rod can be thrown with amazing speed and accuracy, and it is a main weapon of defense. When God called Moses, the desert shepherd, and sent him to deliver Israel out of Egypt, it was through his rod that miracles were made manifest, representing the authority of the divinity. To a child of God, it is comforting knowing the word of God as his authoritative, clear-cut, powerful instrument under which to conduct himself. A rod was also used by shepherd to count his sheep. He would hold it and, kind of like that. And to part their wool, to examine for wounds and defects. Then a staff is uniquely an instrument for the care and management of sheep. No other profession carries one. When you think about it, it's a long, slender stick, often with a crook or hook on one end. And a shepherd uses his staff to gently lift a newborn lamb to its mother if they become separated. And he does this so that his scent won't be on the lamb, which could cause the mother to reject the lamb. A staff is also used on shy and timid sheep who try to keep a distance from the shepherd. Yank them back. It's also used in guiding sheep, assuring them of the proper path, and to rescue sheep out of precarious situations they may have put themselves in. Thus, a staff speaks of kindness. It is essentially an extension of the shepherd's kind hands and can be thought of as a representation of the Spirit of God that puts us in touch with the Good Shepherd. You prepare a table before me. The mountain country of the summer ranges is known as Alplands or Tablelands, or in the US, mesas, which is both the Spanish and an African term for table. Early in the season, the shepherd will go on ahead and make a preliminary survey to determine the best pastures and to prepare the land by clearing out poisonous plants, scoping out potential predators. Humans, too, are often in danger of sampling dangerous things or suffer from predators. Christ, though, has already gone before us into every situation we might encounter. Hence, he understands us with a care and compassion far beyond our ability to grasp. You anoint my head with oil. As mentioned previously, summertime in the sheep realm is insect and parasite time. And nasal flies are the worst. They lie their eggs on the damp mucous membranes of a sheep's nose. They hatch in a few days to form small, slender, worm-like larvae that work their way up the nasal passages into the sheep's head, setting up an intense irritation and inflammation. Just the sight of these flies can panic a herd, and they will run until they drop from exhaustion.
Self-admit, you don't want to be a shepherd.
At the first sign of the flies, the Good Shepherd will apply an antidote over the sheep's nose and head, consisting of a concoction of various oils, sulfur, and tar. Application must continually be renewed. In our own lives, there must be a continuous anointing with God's Spirit to counter the ever-present aggravations of life. Another common disease among sheep is scab, which is caused by microscopic parasites that proliferate in warm weather. It's spread by direct contact. Sheep love to rub heads in a friendly manner. And so scab is most often found in the head. Excuse me. In the Old Testament, a sacrificial lamb without blemish primarily meant being free of scab. Its treatment is also dipping the sheep in an antidote containing linseed oil and other chemicals. Since the head is the most difficult part to treat, it is often done by hand. Like sheep, humans often get our heads together, and that's how sin is often transmitted. Our antidote is Christ coming to us and applying the oil of his own Spirit to our minds. It's pretty amazing when you think about, how wool used to be the material that everybody wore and everything. And so, all the treatment and everything to get it into condition that it can be knitted. I mean, you have to shear the sheep, and then you probably have to wash all these oils and dirt and gunk out, and then I don't know, dry it, and then you have to spin it, and then thank God for contemporary times. Yeah, I mean, and washing out oil is not an easy task. I mean, they didn't have things like Goo Gone, or whatever we use today. Okay, back to the song. My cup overflows. Having been so anointed against life's daily aggravations, the cup of contentment becomes real, even when troubles might come our way. Our shepherd never sleeps. In the sheep realm, sometimes unexpected blizzards occur, and a sheep might become too chilled from exposure. Today, Shepherds would often pour a few spoonfuls of a mixture of brandy and water down its throat, renewing its energy. Palestinian shepherds probably shared their wine with frozen sheep, just as Christ shared the wine of his very lifeblood of his own suffering. No matter what storms we face, his life and vitality are poured into us. Surely goodness and love will follow me. Emphasis throughout the psalm has been on the continued care exercised by the attentive shepherd. The sheep of such a shepherd recognize they are in a privileged position, and even though it might not be conscious, the sheep give back in gratitude. Sheep, if properly managed, can be the most beneficial of all livestock. Their manure is the best balanced of any domestic stock. The sheep's habit of seeking the highest rise of ground on which to rest ensures that the fertility from the rich lowland is deposited on less productive higher ground. And no other livestock, except maybe goats, will consume as wide a variety of herbage, including all sorts of weeds and other undesirable plants. In the same way, we Christians ought to ask ourselves if we leave blessings behind us. Yes, I know, that's quite an image, isn't it?
Perhaps by a different mechanism.
I love that image though. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Here, the term house does not refer only to the sanctuary, synagogue, temple, or church, or other meeting place of God's people, but it also refers to the full round of the year's activities for the flock. It refers to the family or household of flock of the Good Shepherd. In other words, I will dwell in the presence of the Lord forever. And that is it. I know it's a short thing, but I didn't think I would have time to do the other book. And so we'll either just open it up for personal stories about sheep or
That was really good, really interesting.
Isn't it a wonderful book?
Makes me want to read the book for sure.
And I did not know any of this about sheep. I've never been around sheep. I mean, you know.
One thing that you didn't mention is that phrase, in the presence of my enemies. You know, and I always took that as, you know, David thumbing, you know, being glad to thumb his nose at other people. So is there any analysis of that phrase that came through in the book?
Wow, got me on, like what?
Make a table.
You said,
said
set a
that
table before me in the presence of
in the
my.
presence of my enemies, but you didn't mention that part, did he?
No, I mean, you know,
I mean, I just did, you know, maybe the sheep just feel so comfortable.
Well, yeah.
They could dine
I mean,
surrounded by, you know,
being so,
predators, so, yes.
being so, what's the word when you can't, vulnerable as sheep are, they were constantly surrounded by enemies. I mean, coyotes, cougars, pumas,
They just-
parasites.
It seems like he's taking that as a given throughout the whole
Mhm.
storyline as you're portraying, like there's always enemies everywhere around you.
I mean, always, I mean,
Which is weird.
even temptations are enemies, you know?
Yeah, well, and we have a different view. I had a different view of it growing up in the United States. You know, our domesticated animals you see the most, or at least here in Texas, are cows. They're big and they don't have many predators, honestly. One time we went to visit family that was living in Kenya a few years back, the kids, and we went on a safari. I had never been on a safari and I thought they were ridiculously extravagant and what a waste of money to go, you know, it was awesome. And what you learn from it, I know you've been on these before, what you learn from it is like the lions are literally sleeping in the shade inside of the zebras all day long. They're always there. like the predators are always just on the margins. They just don't feel like hunting right now. They're still kind of full from what they killed last night, or, you know what I mean? Like, they're just really, the whole landscape is just full of animals. And you can see which ones are no threat to each other because they'll be grazing together. And which ones they see as threats that'll be kind of hidden in the ground, like the hyenas spend a lot of time in the day kind of out of sight underground. Or hiding in the trees or the bushes, but then you see like around dusk, the cheetahs come out. The lions get more active, they stop sleeping under the trees and start, you know, and so you get this interesting view of like what. A lot of these things make a lot more sense when you think about it in that environment, rather
Yeah.
than the environment that we live in, where everything's divided up and chopped up into properties and has fences around it and, you know, that kind of stuff.
We're always.
We actually have sheep ranches in Brenham, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, come on, you drive to Central Texas. See.
I didn't
You'll see all that
I
stuff.
didn't grow up seeing them, you know?
Well, on my way to Temple, I see them.
Yeah.
But I would remind you that, because we just had it on next door a couple weeks ago, we have coyotes in the heights.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So, you know, bring your cats and dogs in at night, because you may not have them tomorrow. I mean, predators are everywhere, if you wanna think about it that way.
Yeah, that's right.
and I imagine
Yeah,
sheep
because we're
are,
a mile from we're a mile from White Oak Pike.
I've seen them on our street.
I imagine sheep are even
I
prey
have them
to,
block away on Misha.
Houston sky is full of hawks.
Yeah, and we're full of hawks too. Everybody's like, oh, there's a hawk. Yeah, we've had them for 20 years. You know, but so.
I went out into my backyard a few weeks ago, and there was the biggest hawk I had ever seen, just sitting there on the ground. I mean, it was like that, and I thought, whoa, you know, I have this little 20-pound dog.
Thank you for a memory. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania and we lived in town. 2,000 people, but our dear friends had a farm, and we went, and my dad grew up on a farm in Texas. So we would purchase cattle together to raise the beef and spend some time out there. So one time we went in their home, and the most adorable little baby lamb, black, came wandering through the kitchen. They hadn't even bobbed the tail yet. And he was a house pet for the spring because he'd been rejected.
Do they, now see that I did not know, do they bob their tails?
Usually, so this tail was this long on the sheep. And it was just like having another dog.
See,
in the
that's
house,
another
but not
thing.
as trained. Yeah, so it was. a-
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them at petting zoos, you know, but I've never been up close and personal with a sheep.
I get the idea that in the Old Testament, sheep were raised primarily for food. You know, I don't know if there's Old Testament stories of shearings, you know, I know when they shear sheep now, it's, you know, it's a big event, they get the herd together, or flock, I guess it's a flock, right? And shear them all at once, but was that done in the Old Testament?
Gosh, I don't know, he never mentioned it, but yeah, I mean,
We've
people
been
did.
going on for a really, really long time, so.
Because other than animal skins, I mean, I imagine that clothing was made out of wool. What else would they have used?
Well, I mean, they could skin the animal and made, you know, a shearling.
I've seen videos.
When they killed it.
I think it's, if I remember, I don't remember any specific ceremonies or what have you mentioned, there might be some. I definitely see it mentioned, I remember it being mentioned kind of in passing, as if it's just a thing that happens. The sheep get sheared in this, and you don't know point form, and it's used that way as like a background fact of existence.
I've seen videos of shearing, and it's fascinating. I mean, and they can do it so fast.
You know, I was wondering, you know, watching those videos, how it's so easy for them to do it, and it's because they said, like you said, like in the book, once they're on their back, they can't move.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, that's how vulnerable they are, if they're over, they're down.
In New Zealand, we went to a sheep farm and they bring in shearers.
Yeah.
You know, it's not done by the farmer.
Right.
They bring in experts that know how to handle the sheep.
Mhm.
And
So
so
they are done in New Zealand, they moved to England and they share the sheep.
exactly, in England, yeah.
Yeah.
Cause what,
And
cause
they
what,
have sheep shearing competitions.
Yeah. and the thing is, when we were walking with Uda and Phil in England, we were always running into sheep. And one of the things that's weird is, you know, you always think bad black sheep, have it. Little lambs, when they back, they're really loud, back. It's a really ugly sound.
I wish my husband were here because about, I don't know how many years ago, he was in Norway. Way up near the Arctic Circle, and there they have to take the sheep and put them in the barn because the weather is so brutal. And he was invited, when he was there, he was invited to help them let the sheep out of the barn. And he said, when they opened the barn door, the smell, they were so confined for so long, you know, to finally let them out, because he was there in June. And there was still a foot of ice on the lake near this pastor's home. But I wish he were here to tell the story, because I wasn't there at the time. I didn't meet up with him till later so that he could share.
I'm
the
even
story of the
surprised they
sheep.
were able to raise sheep up there. Wow.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was for food, or I'm assuming it would be more for food, perhaps for wool. I don't know what they did. You'll have to ask him about it.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Always
Maybe all of the above, right?
And I think weaving has gone on for centuries and centuries and centuries, because I'm thinking about some old literature like the Odyssey or something. Somebody's waiting for someone to come home and they're.
Oh, yeah, remember, who was it, the one that was, because
The woman
he had
waiting
sinned,
at home.
he had been enchanted by the goddess, and he went out and killed the whole flock, thinking he was killing the enemy, and Atlas, or not Atlas, Ajax. And I remember that story, and everybody came out of their tents the next morning, and there's all these slaughtered sheep, you know.
I once heard, and maybe this dealt with in the book, maybe not. I guess my question is, does he speak to this at all? That the idea of the shepherd laying down his life for the sheep, though it's not in the 23rd Psalm, comes from the shepherd functioning as the gate of the pen. So you have a pen where the sheep go in at night, and then the shepherd lays down across the opening because the sheep won't cross over him to get out, and he becomes the gate, and that's the line down your life for.
Oh, no, he
sheep.
didn't mention that.
No, it wasn't in there at all. I think, I don't know if I heard it in one of like Ed Peterman's sermon years ago, or in a class I took about
No, he
Old
mostly,
Testament or something.
Well, there's the New Testament story of the.
That's right.
I am the gate, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
so he would lie down to keep them from coming out of the
He
gate?
would serve, he would function as, the shepherd would function as the gate, so there'd be no gate on the pen. The shepherd would just lie down across the opening around where they built the fence.
And I think a lot of those fences, at least, you know, pictures I've seen like in Africa, those fences are the gate. The keep is really just a pile of brushes, of dead brush
Right.
Yeah.
that keeps predators from coming through and with an opening that where the,
Right, so it's not built as a structure with a
it's not like
stud and a door that
Yeah,
opens.
yeah.
fence post and
Yeah.
barbed wire.
Right, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, basically, sheep are not very smart.
The only concern I have about this is, you know, it seems to me to kind of be a leap of theology to take the Old Testament and apply it to Jesus in all cases. And particularly in this case, because, I mean, this is not the prophecies of Isaiah. This is David talking about his current situation as I read it. And, you know, I think we can take that, apply it to Jesus, perhaps, but I don't think in any way it was the intent of the psalmist.
Oh, no, I mean,
And that's kind of, you know, I think we need to put it more in the perspective of David or whoever's writing this as if he were, as if the writer were David.
But isn't that what all of the New Testament writers did? I mean, they,
I think the precedent set in the New Testament to do this already. but
I'm sorry, what?
The precedent was set in the New Testament, obviously, to do this.
Right,
Yeah,
right, right.
yeah, especially on this particular metaphor.
But, you know, seeing this story in the image of David saying that, you know, this person who is king,
Right,
saying, I am weak and I need the Lord to protect me,
we're not talking about Jesus.
puts it on in a somewhat of a different perspective, because David being the king of Israel, powerful person, to see himself say, I am the sheep, is, I think there's a lesson for all of us in that too.
I see what you're saying. I mean, even the king needs to be a chief. Yeah, right. I mean, he needs to define himself that way.
Yeah, and even us, you know, we need to define ourselves that.
That was a big debate in ancient Israel, right? Do we even want a king? Because we don't want someone who thinks they're as powerful as God.
Right, or you
Because
know,
God's our king, we don't need another king.
It'll be interesting in the near future to see if, I mean, since people aren't eating as much meat, and especially, you know, like lamb, I can't remember the last time I had lamb, and
I think that's just an American thing.
and wool is sort of becoming a thing of the past. You know, I mean, we want stuff you can just throw in the dryer and, you know, wrinkle free, and
It doesn't itch.
it doesn't itch.
They're doing things with wool though now to process it. That it is very, they can make these really fine wool
Oh,
fabrics. Yeah.
I have this wonderful little cartoon at home. It's this little lamb, and his mother had knitted him a sweater, and he goes, "It itches."
Honestly, all I wear summer and winter is merino wool socks, highly processed, but merino wool socks. They're the coolest in the summer and the warmest in the winter.
Oh,
Same socks. I don't switch one, you know, I don't switch to a different
so
set.
they are trading in.
Oh, yeah.
And shoes are made of merino wool.
Are-
New Zealand, they're real comfortable.
Whoa, that's so there, yeah. So I guess maybe
And
she,
I do wash and dry them. I hope I was supposed to. It lasted for a few years, so maybe it's okay. You mentioned the thing about the lamb poop or the sheep poop being good fertilizer. I learned that like in elementary school or middle school, I don't remember when it was, but we had to do a science fair project. It was like mandatory. And I did all this work on this collection of feathers you could find in our neighborhood. There was an empty field and I had tried to figure out what bird it was from the feathers I found, et cetera. And I made this color and I was so proud of it. I put all this effort into it. And my friend across the street knew people who raised animals for FFA. And he basically just measured how tall the grass grew in the different pens and figured out that sheep poop was the best fertilizer because the grass grew the tallest in that pen. And he won first place. So mad. All this time in the encyclopedia and going to the library trying to find these, it wasn't like the internet where you just look up.
You know,
And he just measured how tall the grass was in the poop bin.
that's a wonderful, wonderful.
Okay, that's gonna be a good,
discussion.
introduction to my book that I'm doing next Sunday, Raising Sweet Class.
Oh, yeah, I've read that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's.
But in addition to, not having experienced livestock and wildlife much and stuff, are citified, how sanitized our life is now. We go, when you want to fertilize your lawn, you go and you buy a bag and it's these granules, use a thing and you spread it out and stuff. And people used to use animal manure. And I remember back when I was growing up,
Well,
my
while
dad.
we're on the topic of manure, part of the, there was a big industry to go mine guano. And the ships would go out for a year's journey to fill up with guano in these specific.
Bad poop.
Well, I
right.
think it was more bird poop, but it is.
Well, yeah, both
From
fat
both
and
islands in the Pacific.
yeah, those big,
And then they would mine it also from caves too, but they would then bring it back. And just think, okay, that was your job, and you know, these ships, you know, we've got oil tankers come,
I don't know.
there were tankers that brought this stuff back. Until Bayer invented a way to create ammonia fertilizer.
Mhm.
And,
Oh, the Germans.
Well,
Germans came up with
my
it.
dad, who was a real curmudgeon, and he didn't believe in progress or anything like this, you know. If we used to do it this way, by God, that's the best way to do it. And growing up in California in the 50s, 60s, my dad would go out to some ranch and get all this chicken manure. And he would spread it on the lawn, you know, too much to the mortification of my mother, and it just smelled, you know. And now we're so sanitized, you know.
Yeah, you can still buy natural fertilizers. I mean, people they turn their backyards into compost piles.
Right, sure.
Well, people used to, you know, when you circus things, the elephant
Yeah.
was silent buys, people would come wait in line.
You know, I actually have some greeting cards with little cutout elephants that are made from elephant poop. It's paper made from
Yes.
elephant poop. Yeah, it's on my
There's-
bulletin board.
When you also, well, one of the things you do when you go on a safari is you let yourself be trapped by the native tourist industry.
Yeah.
And they teach you how to like use elephant poop to start a fire, and you pay them money to teach you how to use elephant poop to start a fire, which is a very useful skill here. And you buy these homemade, locally made crafts and stuff like that. So like your last stop is always the Maasai village or whatever, where they're selling it, And
Well, it does make lovely paper, though.
yeah, it actually, it worked really well.
I guess they're vegetarians, so it's all plant.
Yeah.
So that your toilet flushed into a tank, which had not only the fertilizer in it, but a lot of moisture. And to a large extent, we've gotten rid of that because the cities have taken over and they require that you be part of their system.
Well, do they treat it with chemicals or something? I mean,
No, they just poop in the.
But I thought,
Flush it in the water.
I thought there was a danger in using human waste for fertilizer.
I don't know, that was never raised. I had an aunt who lived north of San Diego and had this septic tank system.
Well, there are septic tank systems all over the country.
Yeah.
To get away from the big cities.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, let's not.
Yeah, but today they're treated with chemical and stuff like that.
The solution.
And then you can use it.
This is hard for the group. Anyway, this has been a very delightful. We stop the recording.
Yeah.
Folks can talk about your questions, everyone online. And, yeah.